Hey there! Welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And it's my 13th anniversary on this channel. Again, I can't thank you all enough for sticking around this long. 13 years is a long time, and it's been really special, especially with all the changes on the channel this year. But for the matter at hand in this tradition, where I go back to an album from last year that y'all voted on for me to cover, and this is one of those years where there was no real obvious contender. Literally, I've got a 5-way tie in terms of albums that I could pick to cover for this anniversary, with many of the remaining votes just all over the damn place. And that was also the case last year, and I still got a very obvious standout to speak on, but that was also from 2024, a pretty stacked year. Looking back on 2025, the contending choices from your votes are, well, for starters, there's James K. and the ambient pop breakthrough Friend. It's never really come up on my radar. I just wasn't familiar in the slightest. I think it's okay. Similar case for the abstract hip-hop collaboration between Celestiphone and Dealers of God called Cult Subterranea. Kinda wish I liked that a lot more, but the strangely surreal and shambling cinematic production wound up more kooky than sticky for me. A little bit disappointing there. Then there was that newest 5 Seconds of Summer album. Look, y'all, they've steadily improved to be a mostly decent pop rock band, but I'm not exactly losing sleep over them. I heard the album last year, I just didn't have a lot to say. It's why I didn't review it last year. Then there was Lost the Thanaka and the critically acclaimed experimental self-titled project. Almost certain I got the pronunciation of that wrong, my apologies, because I heard that one as well. I was considering it last year for the sheer audacity of some of its experimentation, but it's also an album where the mixing and the production is very much an acquired taste that I personally do not have. It bounced off me pretty hard at that time. At some point, I'll probably have to find an inroad with them if they stick around. We'll have to see there. And that left, well, by far the most popular option, although it's the first case of someone actively voting against them in the polling, and it's also an act where I easily have the most history, and a decent amount to say. And considering that this year, for a lot of her fans, has been that long overdue victory lap, yep, let's get to it. For my 13th anniversary for Spectrum Pulse, the album that I'm going to be talking about this year, from Zara Larsson, Midnight Sun. So here's the fun thing. I've got a longer history than most with Zara Larsson. I covered her as early as 2016 on Billboard Breakdown, and I reviewed her sophomore album So Good a year later, which is a good project, but a bit of an awkward step down from One, a very strong debut album that the majority of people never heard outside of Europe because it wasn't even released digitally outside of her home country. And that debut, which I did hear, colors a lot of my thoughts on her, generally very consistent in establishing her vivacious and capricious personality with the pipes to really back it up, routinely left frustrated by songwriting and production that could not. Now, this to me has cast Zara Larsson in a bit of an interesting light, because when she has the pieces in order to support her, the songs can be great, they can be awesome. I still love Never Forget You from MNEK, one of the best hit songs of the 2010s. And the rest of the world rediscovering Lush Life this year has been a real treat. It's one of my favorite songs again of this year. But her industry support has always felt questionable. And that takes us to the outright mess that was 2021's Poster Girl, an outright bad album where her handlers and co-writers completely misunderstood her strengths and saddled her with a lot of C-list, dated late 2010s dreck. Now, this appeared to also color some of her 2024 project Venus that I didn't even know existed. So when I heard that last year's Midnight Sun was that triumphant return to form that finally gave her the album that she deserved, well, I'm sorry, my standard is her debut. And while the title track of this was fine, I'd probably call it great after hearing it a lot, that remix of Stateside with Pink Pantheress has never really landed for me, even if she had streamlined her formula here for a very very lean album and gotten back with some of the names that helped make some of her best previous songs, like MNEK. So yeah, I had a lot of skepticism, and I've got nearly a decade of history to justify that, but I did have some optimism too. And I'll be very honest, sometimes the image and presumption of serving across stan culture and social media can paper over a lot of mediocre dance music, sometimes even get you critical acclaim. Some reactions that are satisfied too easily if they get the right look and trend to ride. And one more point, I'm covering the original album, not the Girls Trip Deluxe that's stuffed full of remixes that dropped in May this past year. So okay, not enough wasting time. Is Midnight Sun really worth all that hype? Well, here's my conundrum. Because I think this is comfortably Zara Larsson's best project since her debut, maybe even on par or a little bit better than it, because it's a sleeker and a way better constructed album. In fact, if there's one major point of credit I will give Zara Larsson for Midnight Sun, it's just how tight it is, built from every angle in order to maximize efficient pop delivery that can play to the TikTok game without sounding beholden to it. And yeah, it's really good. Almost to the point of being a little bit underwhelming to discuss, because it executes on the fundamentals so well and pretty much stays in that lane. What do you even need to say or add? So while I am going to review the project, in the spirit of this channel in 2026, I'm going to try to ask a bigger question. Why Zara Larsson? And why her now? Why is she in the zeitgeist? What makes her special? And why has 2026 been not just her breakout year, but also where some have gone back to revive her past hits? Because let's establish a few things right from the top. As a pop personality, Zara Larsson isn't especially interesting. And by that I mean she doesn't have much of the unique signifiers that would put her over the top in pop music and pop culture beyond this ruthless competence across the board and the straightforward desire to be the biggest name. Now that drive, that ambition will do a lot. We'll come back to that. But let's do a broader comparison to some of the other pop divas of this era in the 2020s. I mean, Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish have a considerably more idiosyncratic writing style. I don't even think they're comparable. I put Sabrina Carpenter, Chappell Roan, and Olivia Rodrigo in a similar camp due to Link producers. Guess we gotta throw Lana Del Rey in there too. Lorde is a little bit weirder and higher concept with her flourishes in pop, similar to how Miley Cyrus is in her own universe, very much independent of playing the game. Charlie XCX wants to be more cutting edge on the artsy hyperpop side. I mean, the closest comparisons might be the acts that are the pop divas that borrow broadly from across the genre and then synthesize something that can draw from the past but feel very forward thinking, but also make pop almost for its own sake, to the point where additional personality, presentation, and performance, that kind of becomes the spice, the augmentation of just great underlying craft, a very high floor. Now this would make a lot of sense given the long-running Swedish pop archetypes that go back decades, and this is where you're going to find your Carolyn Polachek, your Dua Lipa, your Carly Rae Jepsen, your Pink Pantheress, and now I guess Zara Larsson. Incidentally, this is the lane that Slater finally transcended this year, and only barely, and that Tate McRae, Anne Marie, and Bebe Rexha have been trying and mostly failing to reach their entire careers. And you know, for a while, Bebe Rexha was actually the unfortunate comparison that I made with Zara Larsson because they were playing to the same hot, blonde, bombshell pop archetype, not particularly bothered with a lot in the way of requirements to be smart or experimental or have the most unique personality behind the music, but who also had a very obvious dogged commitment and desire to be a pop star. And not just that, be among the A-list of pop star, the biggest possible celebrity. And yet oftentimes they just kept outside of that lane with the backhanded compliments of, yeah, you know what, they can get one or two of them off, but beyond that, Now with BB Rexa, my argument has generally been a broad lack of talent and a lot of clumsy management, but I can't say that for Zara Larsson, at least not fully. She has a really good voice and a pretty considerable vocal range. Those original comparisons I made to Ariana Grande, they weren't being made for nothing. Now this has also led to some putting her alongside R&B, trying to bucket her near a Doja Cat or Rihanna or Tyla, and I'm not sure I fully buy that. I mean, she's got her flirtations with the modern, hip-hop, dance-ready side of R&B, and there is that mediocre Tyla collab that I'm not sure anybody liked, but it's always felt more trendy than grounded in culture or history. So when I hear that there's been an industry shakeup and Zara Larsson has likely fulfilled her epic contract, which has now allowed her to sign with RCA, and given how they treat R&B, well, we'll see how it translates. That label's reputation precedes it. I'm gonna leave that there. But again, let's get back to talent. That, alongside the right look and a few bops, they're gonna get you in the door. That'll get you on a festival stage, no doubt about it. But you tend to see a ceiling materialize for the pop girls that only seem to ever have the sleek craft and don't precisely go deeper, who might build a die-hard niche among the critics or the club scene or the gays, and there's a decent amount of overlap there, if you know you know, but who also don't get that mainstream recognition in the same way. They, again, have high floor, low ceiling. And this is where I present the reality that so much of the next step to ascend beyond the B-list, it can be in artistry, but it's more likely tied to industrial factors. I genuinely hate the whole Khia Asylum tier list shit. Not just because for the majority of pop acts, it's not really the fault, more of their management, promotion, and label fucking up the process, and yet they get all the blame. Because that's easier. It gets the post share to drive the social media discourse, and it saves you the burden of having to know, well, anything about a lot of things, but especially the music industry. It's why for so many of you, up until the past year or two, maybe the last 2 years, if you were in the know, and the majority of you were not, Zara Larsson was in that Khia Asylum, at the bottoms of the tier list. I saw them. And while I could go on at length there, I already went on that diatribe back in my Bruno Mars video earlier this year. And the more interesting question then becomes, okay, how do you get out of that? How do you get people to realize there was better there all along? That's a pretty loaded follow-up question. Now, this is where I actually had to take a step back, because in discussing this whole process and this album with my wife, she brought up the somewhat novel point, well, look, if the music's good, that can lead to popularity coming back around. Sometimes it is that simple. Sometimes good word of mouth works. And while I am loath to give the public any credit for actually doing that, Occam's razor dictates that sometimes it could be exactly what happened, so yeah, let's talk about Midnight Sun. Let's get into the details. I've already mentioned how tight this album is in terms of its runtime and song construction and focus, but this could only work courtesy of MNEK's airy sense of scale to still make it feel big, and Zone's wiry grooves that sound considerably more refined and better mastered to a lot of its work with Kesha. And the key thing with this project is that when it's running on pure sandy patter and a lot of summertime momentum, which I'm going to chalk up to her DJ and co-producer Margot SS, who co-produced damn near this entire album, I'm going to say it feels kind of special. The stuttering drum and bass and crescendo of the title track, It's Only Grown on Me, I'll call it a great song. The key modulations on the bridge of Crush, the watery accordion of Eurosummer, which, speaking of Kesha, feels like a slicker version of what she did on Joyride. And while Zara Larsson's higher keening whistle tone delivery draws the obvious comparisons to Ariana Grande, but especially Carolyn Polachek, who just hits that higher plane of power for me, look, I can't deny that it captures some pure hedonistic euphoria on cuts like Blue Moon and Saturn's Return. They're both highlights here. Cause let's make this clear. The effortless, vivacious attitude to seek out pleasure at all costs, that is all about simultaneously being the coolest and hottest person at the party, and if you're not, you're gonna get there by any means necessary, that underscores everything that Midnight Sun does. Girls Girl is a prime example. I mean, she could show some solidarity with her friend, her longtime friend at this party, but the guy is so hot, and she's going to take what she wants and hang the consequences, even if it ruins a friendship. Followed up by Crush openly admitting for the gray zone of morality in all of its emotional cheating. I mean, it doesn't all work. Pretty Ugly is trying for a brash party girl, party rap flex that doesn't quite land as well post Worst Girl in America. We've seen plenty girls get ugly like this. It doesn't feel all that special. And the cutesy sexual flagrance of the closer Puss Puss, feeding off the stuttering house touches of the ad-libs on Hot and Sexy, just kind of gets an eye roll out of me. This album certainly has its heel turns and maybe even can justify them, but they're better executed in a catty, above-it-all diva who just owns the dance floor in the room, not wallowing in the dirt or overplaying her hand sexually. But the song that seemed to do the most to state Zara Larsson's ethos is called, rather on the nose, The Ambition, where she basically lays out how she finds validation from those vast audiences. She dreams too big. When she scrolls on her phone, she wonders why it's not her. It literally doesn't make sense that others don't want what she does. I mean, it's selfishness is virtue manifest, and the only reason the myopia works at all is because it's shallow pop music, allowed to revel in its naivete as referenced on Saturn's Return, and, okay, let's be real, as talented as Zara Larsson is, some of this feels damn near delusional compared to the rest of the field, and I think on some level she might know that. It works as this heady dreamscape that comes in hot, heady summer nights. I mean, it matches how Atlas Shrugged wedges in its objectivist monologues alongside the sex scenes. Ayn Rand could probably dance to this album in hell. So again, why now? Why Zara Larsson? It's not like we're short of pop divas that do things similar to what she does and present the way she does. It's not like there's a unique hole in the marketplace for her. I thought initially about the club boom in the late 2000s where her brand of ambitious but painstakingly direct and escapist pop might make more sense. That's not trying to do anything but set up a glamorously ruckus party, especially if you can make the argument that would fit alongside the recession pop pseudo trend that folks have been talking about the past couple of years. But I'm sorry, Charlie XCX and Slater are right there, and I would argue they captured the niche and atmosphere a lot more effectively, and we'll see just how well Charlie XCX does so when she releases that next project later this year. I mean, you could argue that it's just the right time for this brand of dance pop, and she's just capitalizing on the moment, and she's got the ambition and drive to keep pressing on when it seems like chunks of the industry have been kind of coasting this year, or that she probably would have been bigger with the right industry forces behind her much more before now, which also explains why her previous hits have been revived and re-examined. But I'm also not sure that's fully true either. That would ignore how her song Symphony with Clean Bandit's been a monster hit even in her down years. That would have been guaranteeing her festival bookings for, again, the past decade, especially in Europe. Or how she's strung out some decent guest features the past 10 or so years independent of her albums. I mean, I don't like that remix of Stateside, I'll say it again, but it probably got more ears on her music in just the features alone. Or I don't know, is it just taking advantage of the fact that certain mainstream pop has had a down year in 2026 with a few acts who are in between albums or running off of bad albums? Why not Zara Larsson if the quality was there? Or was always there? And that for the die-hard fans, it was the time to push towards some vindication. Or hell, maybe some of it has to do with that slight conservative shift that's creeping in between the lines in some mainstream pop music, especially in the dance variety the past couple of years. This is where I could make a hell of a lot more of Zara Larsson wearing that Burzum dress a couple of years ago, pose some very uncomfortable questions of where it might align with her own politics. She pleaded ignorance at the time. How much do you believe that? But I talked about that conservative subtext when I reviewed Brat 2 years ago, down to the messy musings about family alongside being a megastar, which also occur on the penultimate song on this album. I could highlight that the ruthless, hierarchical, capitalism-forward pop industry, especially nowadays, can absolutely foster that sort of success and fame at any cost. Hang morality, it's all about me attitude. That's the final stage of poptimism and stan culture, and idolatry in more ways than one. Some of y'all might pose as liberal or progressive when you buy into it, but but I've seen the sharp limits of your idealism when it comes to challenging your escapism. But this is where I also had to take a step back, because I don't think there's just one answer, even beyond everything I just listed. And you know, that might be the point. This is often a big mistake made by video essayists when they put forward some big, compelling, unseen factor behind many trends and or ideas and say it's just that, when cultural or industrial forces are necessarily more complicated. It makes for better clickbait pointing to that secret behind this artist's success or popularity, rather than just saying, yeah, probably was a lot of things. Sometimes there are overarching cultural trends that can be a root cause of something going right or wrong. You can convincingly argue that the pandemic probably derailed a lot of Zara Larsson's plans with Poster Girl in 2021, alongside a lot of bad pop trends in the late 2010s. But skipping the follow-through and nuance is how we wind up with wretched simplifications like the Khia Asylum in the first place. A bad shorthand that doesn't know how to accommodate exceptions in its framework, or really know anything besides ranking and baiting drama, or the hierarchy. One thing that's fascinating about Zara Larsson's Midnight Sun is that everything kinda had to go right at the right time in order to get enough attention. Where for as calculated as I know she is, I still half believe her on Saturn's return that she doesn't fully know what she's doing. She said it herself. And even then, the odds that people will remember or care about this album outside of very niche pop communities are probably pretty slim. The stark limit of reaching the top of that pyramid, not quite recognizing that you're the last to know when you're cold on the other side. I mean, none of this feels built to last. The Pyrrhic victory that she'll receive with one glorious drunken summer blowout, there's the creeping reality and dread that if you're drunk, you might not remember it. So she'll have to do it again. Keep the hits coming. Sometimes that will be enough. If her ceiling is this generation's Kylie Minogue, that's a legacy to have. I'm sure she wouldn't turn it down. She's got the talent, the formula seems to have crystallized, and we'll see if the deal with RCA lets her further expand artistically and gives her the popular and commercial support she needs to play the game on the bigger stage. In the meantime, Midnight Sun, and I guess the remix album this year, is a personal triumph. It feels long overdue, especially for the fans, and a revealing snapshot of the system actually seeming to work as designed in a slight microcosm. You can still get good to great art out of that at the end of the day, even if the system's got its many problems. And given that it was released a little too late in 2025 in September to never make full use of the summer, this year feels like an opportunity that she's not gonna waste. I mean, that can be an inspiration, an ambition that's worth the party. Pretty good, damn good party for it. Just call me back when the party's over. Again, all I'm saying. So yeah, thank you all for watching so much. I really do appreciate. Again, if you'd like to like and subscribe, I would be extremely grateful. I'll admit that I'm a little bit surprised I had this much to say about Zara Larsson. I was preparing to hear the album and covering this off pretty breezily, giving myself bigger chances to get back to that next big video essay, but there is more to say here. And I do think Zara Larsson is a slightly more interesting figure and more reflective of specific pop trends than I think people have really keyed in on. We'll see where all that goes. And plus gave me a chance to rag on the Khia Asylum again, which I'm really grateful for as well. But again, it's been 13 years. For those of you who have stuck around this long or who have actually watched some of the major changes for this channel, every shift and evolution I've done, especially those of you who have hopped on board with the video essays this year, which have really done a lot to galvanize my creativity, I can't thank you enough. It's been really special. And again, I don't know if it's going to be 13 more, but I'm sure it's all going to try. But hey, if you want to stick around more, again, please like, please subscribe, leave your comments down there below. And if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm again all ears. And if you want to happen to support this channel longer term so we can get those next 13 years, I highlight my Patreon and my YouTube memberships. Tied to both, there are ways to access my Discord at certain tiers. There's also opportunities to influence my schedule, what I cover either in written reviews or in certain videos that are more longer form. They don't come out quite as often, but they are special when they do, and I cover a lot of ground. But again, don't feel obligated. Tough times, believe me, I know, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. Thank you all so much for 13 years. It's been so special. And I'll see you next time.